Very good evening to you all. I, Dr. Bobby Basu, Faculty Heritage Business School, take this privilege to welcome you all to this webinar organized by Heritage Business School. Now, Heritage as a group started its journey in the year 2001 and is backed up by Kalyan Bharti Trust, which is formed by a group of 22 like-minded industrialists and philanthropists of Kolkata who came together to promote higher education in India and in the state of West Bengal in particular. Heritage Business School Kolkata, which is the management wing of Heritage Group, has started this journey in the year 2003 and runs management program and is affiliated to Maulana Abul Kalam Azad University of Technology and is approved by All India Council of Technical Education. Now, under the visionary leadership of our top management, Heritage Business School has achieved many accolades. To mention a few in the recent past, we have HBS has been chosen as ET Edge, an initiative by Economic Times, as one of the best education grants in 2020. Also, HBS Kolkata has been declared as the most preferred B School of the year 2020 in the East at the 13th ASSOCHAM Higher Education. Now, at Heritage Business School, apart from academics, we organize Industry Institute interface sessions on a regular basis where we invite experts from academia and corporate houses to interact with our students to enhance their practical knowledge through their experiential learning. Although because of this lockdown, we could not conduct physical sessions, but for the last 2 months, we are conducting webinars. And today we are very happy to have amongst us Dr. Ravindra Singh, Associate Professor in Marketing from IIM Calcutta, who will be sharing his thought on the topic, marketing strategies in post-COVID world. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Now, during this lockdown period, one thing has become very prominent and pertinent, that online activities have accelerated, whether it is in terms of online classes or online webinars or presence of people in social media. These online activities have increased. And not only this, we can see varied profile of people who are active in online activities. Earlier, millennials and Gen Z were the only ones who were active in online activities, but now we can see many baby boomers are quite active and they are quite familiar with this online activity. So in this situation, I personally think that companies should enhance or increase their visibility through online presence. Otherwise, they will have to face the consequence of what is called out of sight, out of mind. With this backdrop, I would now request our director, sir, Dr. Jain Mukhopadhyay, to deliver the welcome speech and carry forward the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Bobby. Good evening to all the participants today. On behalf of the Heritage Group, on the behalf of Heritage Business School, and on my personal behalf, I would like to welcome Dr. Ravindra Singh and the faculty members and all the students who have joined us today evening. So, Dr. Ravindra Singh is an associate professor of IIM Calcutta. He has done his engineering from IIT BHU Varanasi, the same institute where I had gone. Then MBA from XLRI Jamshedpur and a PhD from IIM Ahmedabad. So now as a faculty of IIM Calcutta, that's also is my alma mater. So I'm very happy to have Dr. Ravindra Singh, a lot of common things. And I have been knowing him for many years now. He's a prolific researcher, having published in reputed international journals, Inter Alia, the International Marketing Review, Marketing Theory, Industrial Marketing Management, to name a few. He's also worked for several years in the sales and marketing in several multinational companies. He's also in the board of startup firms. So I think that, since many of the students want to become entrepreneurs, we'll maybe take out 3-4 minutes time from Dr. Singh. If you can tell us a little bit about startups also, about the future and how they're roughing it out in a very difficult time. He's also authored a textbook on sales and distribution, which has been widely accepted by many IIMs. He's also conducted several training programs for leading companies in India, both at the senior level and the mid-management level. So I think we have a very good speaker today who's worked in the industry, who's now in academia, in the top institute. And also he's very well connected because he's regularly conducting corporate trainings, and also he's publishing research papers. So I think it's a wonderful thing to have. And you know, as we are talking of before 2008, we used to talk of the world before 2008 and after 2008 because of the great financial crisis. And today we are talking of the world before COVID and after COVID. So, you know, post-COVID, many things may change. And I'm particularly concerned that some consumer behavior may change. But Dr. Singh can tell us that whether there are going to be some permanent changes in consumer behavior or not. And I was thinking that, you know, like VIP bags, there's no sale of VIP. It is the market leader in luggages. There's no sales in the last 2 years. I do not know. One of the apprehensions is people are not going to travel much and therefore VIP is going to suffer. So, you know, this kind of companies will have to actually totally reinvent themselves. I just give one example of VIP, for example. The travel, the hotel industry is going to suffer a lot. The restaurants, we know, is going to suffer a lot, and the aviation industry. So they have to actually reinvent themselves if this kind of situation persists, right? And we have been talking of the work from home, but I think sales and distribution, to my opinion, is one area where you cannot work from home. The sales and distribution has to be done directly face-to-face with the consumer. Of course, the digital marketing was already increasing, and now I think COVID has made it fast forward, basically. So we are going to have more and more of digital marketing. Also, the rural marketing behavior will change considerably because it was always a very different kettle of fish. Now in the post-COVID era, the rural marketing is very different. And we have been talking of, you know, that the discretionary spending and luxury spending will drop. But whether it's a temporary phenomena of, you know, the discretionary spending, because in marketing, we talk of three things: needs, wants, and desires. Now, I think the job of the strategic marketer is to see that how to convert and make the consumer feel that that desire or want is just a need. And he starts buying even a luxury brand thinking that he just needs it. The automobile industry is another area where, you know, there may be major changes. So I think now I'll give it to the other area where in the educational sector, I think including IITs and IIMs, the main thing is the campus. I think all students have gone to IITs, IIMs tell us that, you know, it's basically, you know, 40% is what we learn from in the classrooms, so 60% is what we learn in the hostels and the dormitories. So if you don't have the campus life and the classroom, actual classrooms, I think our students are going to miss out a lot. So I think I'll also ask Dr. Ramendra to tell that, you know, how the educational institutes and how they should plan out in the next few months or next year. So with that, Dr. Ramendra Singh, I'll welcome you once again, and over to you, Dr. Ramendra Singh.
And thank you, Professor Bobby, for the nice introduction. And thank you to Heritage Business School for kindly inviting me. And so I have 20-25 minutes, so let me just get started let me just share my screen or share my presentation. So I hope you can see the slides, all of you.
It is starting. It is starting. Yeah, it has come. It has come.
It has come? Okay, great.
Yeah, it has come.
Okay, so so as wonderfully introduced to the topic by Professor Jayanto, that we are living in a very strange time. We have moved our reference from 2008 to 2019, and that's what is called the post-COVID 2019 world. So it's very difficult to predict anything. I'm not trying to predict much in this talk today with a very limited time. I've just tried to compile what many other thinkers and experts and consultants are also trying to suggest, and some kind of guesstimates as to how things might change. They may not change the way that we think might change, but there will be a lot of uncertainty. There will be a lot of ambiguity, as we call, VUCA world. So we are actually facing the VUCA world, post this pandemic. So let's get started. So now, if you want to look at where we stand, so as of, I think, yesterday, the world had 6 million infected people, and out of that, in India, if you see, almost 2 lakh people have got infected so far. And this is the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare website, which shows that there are still almost 1 lakh active cases, and another almost 1 lakh cases have been cured. Around 5,000 people have lost their lives. And so and as you know, daily we have around 8,000 to 10,000 cases every day. So we are almost probably at the peak or nearing the peak. But that's a different story, how things will pan out, how long it is going to live. But as we are talking today, we are in the unlock world. So we have faced the lockdown in its various stages: lockdown 1, lockdown 2, lockdown 3, lockdown 4. And while lockdown 5 with its restriction is there, in a way it's more of an unlock 1.0, as government has tried to term it. So we have moved from lockdown to unlockdown, but it is going to be a lot of time before we actually move to the new normal, as they say. So we're going to talk about how things will move from now, or has moved from the past to the new normal, and what would that new normal be. We have in the last 2-3 months got introduced to a lot of new words, new terms like social distancing. We should keep 6 feet away from others. We should wear masks. We should wash our hands with sanitizer. We should sanitize everything that people touch. We have got used to getting thermal screening at the entry points and exit points to various places, including our own, apartments. And plus the restrictions that we are seeing for the first time on travel and shopping and movement. We are also seeing that there's a lot of avoidance from the people for touching, whatever we used to buy, and even meeting people used to be a high touch occasion. We used to handshake, we used to touch people, but now everything has become low touch. People are avoiding deliberately because of social distancing itself. And so this is the new habits. We are forming new habits because we are forced to do that for the sake of our lives. And that will, as Professor Jayanto, nicely said, that some of it is going to stay and some of it is going to probably not stay. So some habits are temporary, some will go away, and some will remain. And that might change our behaviors, as human beings, as consumers. That this might also lead to higher adoption of digital platforms, whether it's e-commerce platform or mobile platforms. And let's see, how things change. Then we have got introduced to a lot of apps because of living in lockdown situation. We have got introduced to new kind of apps like contact tracing apps, like the Arogya Setu app, which is kind of looking at us from a health point of view and tracing where we go, what kind of people meet us, who comes in the radius of 6 feet from us. And then they're going to predict whether you are likely to be infected or not likely to be infected. Then there is a new segmentation approach in the world, like symptomatic and asymptomatic. So if you are showing symptoms of COVID, you are symptomatic. If you are not showing, then you are symptomatic. And that's an interesting, way that we have lived our lives in the last 2-3 months. But in all of this, what have we learned and what have we not learned? So what has caught the attention in the world of business, and more specifically in the world of marketing, is the recent ad that got a lot of it faced a lot of controversy, is the Kent RO company. Hema Malini is the brand ambassador, and specifically the atta maker and the bread maker. So they came out with this ad, as you can see, which is insulting for the maids, specifically for the maids who are from a different social class, and here they are trying to. Maybe they were unwittingly caught in this controversy. They did not want to disrespect. They ended up doing that. So they're saying that we want to promote our atta maker because don't rely on the maids who are cooking your food. They might be infected. So this shows that organizations need to be very, very sensitive in this world, and specifically it's been a very kind of a democratizing world in the sense that the most attention has been obtained by domestic helps and migrant workers, and rightly so. They never got the attention which they're getting in these times. And also Kent RO example shows us that we have to be sensitive even to the bottom of the pyramid people, even if they're not your customers, but you have to show respect. But more specifically, what wrong communication can do to your brand. Similarly, there is another lesser known brand called Lotus. They also show, they put a cross mark against domestic help, and they put a tick mark, as you can see, on their goods. And what they're trying to suggest is that you should avoid the maids, don't call them for work, and you should use our appliances. Contactless. Now, contactless is a good word to use in your marketing communication, but it should not come at the cost of somebody's job or somebody's respect. So these are two examples where things have not gone in the right way. But then there are companies like Domino, and I'm sure you have seen this ad. Many of us have probably started buying and eating also. And most companies in the post-COVID world has moved to what is called zero contact delivery or zero contact marketing and so on. So Domino is communicating in a very nice, clear, clean way that, how now the delivery of pizza is going to be different from what it used to be. It's going to be zero contact. So they talk about zero contact delivery or zero contact takeaway. So even if you're taking it away, it's zero contact. So the way the delivery boys have been retrained, or how they will interact with their restaurants, or they will interact with their customers, is going to be zero contact. Now, this shows that, even if it is not zero contact in days to come, it is going to be low contact. So we are moving towards a low contact world. So that was one example of how to be sensitive to the current situation. And then you have other industries also following the same way. You have airline industry. This is one example from GoAir. They talk about all the guidelines that you have to follow while flying safely. And then you talk about all advisory and suggested safety guidelines like wearing a mask, or, is again a low contact one. If you see low contact delivery, service delivery, right? So registration, and then web check-in is compulsory. There's a limit on the baggage, and self-sanitizing, and so on. So these kind of things have been introduced. Now they have been introduced more from the compliance point of view. But some of these things might stay. Some of these might stay because people are still changing their habits, under this situation. So we are just trying to say that there is a way that you need to communicate, but more importantly, what is important to understand is how things will change. So if you look at some consulting companies like Nielsen, AC Nielsen, they say that depending on how what your horizon is, whether it's a short term, or it's a medium term, or it's a long run, it can be any of the three situations that you see here. So as you know, the world has more than 250 countries, and all of them are not equally, on the same platform. They're not equally in the they're not equally badly infected. Some are rebounding, like if you see China is back, they've opened up. So, and some are still struggling, like maybe India and US and others, and some will take some more time, right? Some will take a longer time, some will take a shorter time. Now, if you look at it from that point of view, so we can divide how soon are we going to come back. We can divide them into three parts. One is if they're coming back as soon as the third quarter of this year. So that's rebounding, when things will be normalized. Obviously, things will never be normal as such, so as to say. But if things starts opening up as quickly as quarter three, it's more of an early rebound strategy. But if things take more time, that means it's going to be longer. It's going to be a medium-term strategy. Things will open up in the medium term, not in the immediate short run. Then it will be more of a reboot. So why are we seeing rebounding and reboot? Why are we using different words? We are using different words because rebounding is like, you were lying low and then you bounce back. You don't have to necessarily change. If you have to wait for 2 months and then you have said, okay, fine, now go back, then you don't have to change in 2 months. But if you have to wait for a year, you have to reboot, right? It's like the computer. If you don't use it for 20 minutes, it will go to sleep. But if you don't use it for many days or weeks, it will have to be rebooted. So this is the same case with the businesses also. If they lie dormant because of COVID for more than a year, they can't rebound. They have to reboot, right? So that is the medium-term strategy. And the third is that if you are lying low for a very, very long time, that's a long-term strategy. You can't even reboot. You have to reinvent. And that is the case with some countries, some companies. Depending on the context, they might not be able to jump back in even in the fourth quarter of this year. So they might take a longer time, like first half of 21. So that's a reinvent. And Nielsen also says that the consumer behavior itself has undergone a lot of change. It has moved from, it has actually moved in from first to the 6 stages. So they talk about 6 different habits that have been formed and changed from one to the other. So if you look at this from 1 to 6, and we can all relate to this. So initially when we were told that, oh, there's a virus, now it is going to get transmitted. So you have to stop going out and sit inside your home, don't go out, and unless it's very essential. And then people and everybody was learning. Nobody knew what is going to happen, what is happening, how bad is the virus, how long it is going to take. And think from a consumer point of view. We are all consumers, right? So from that point of view, we were just thinking from a proactive health. Everybody had one thing in mind, which was health. And that time we were proactive because governments were still struggling to understand. Nobody was, the WHO warnings in the initial days was as bad as saying that there is no human-to-human contact, right? So the question of reactive healthcare did not come. So that time we were more proactive that, we should take care of our health and immunity, and because the cases were still far and few. But slowly, when more light came, more knowledge came, more guidelines came, we became more reactive. We were told to wear masks. We were told to sanitize our hands. We were told to not go out or go out in a restricted way and not touch or touch and then sanitize. So, as we were told, we changed our habit. So we became more reactive because we were reacting to what we were being told. And then came the third kind of behaviors, which was more like, stocking up, keep piling up, because we don't know when the shop is going to open. I don't know how soon I can go out. In many states, we saw a curfew, right? So, for example, if you see places like Bombay, it was partial curfew. Places like Uttar Pradesh, again, partial curfew or even at time full curfew. And there's a curfew in the night time also. So when you are living in a situation where you don't know things are changing every day, lockdown 1.0 and then 2.0, things might change. And we don't know how things will turn out to be good or bad. We start reacting in a different way. We become more panicked and more anxious, and we start piling up. So what will we pile up? We will not pile up things which are not important. We will pile up things which are very essential, like food, like medicine, like that are safety kits, like hand sanitizers and soaps and hand wash and face mask and all those things, right? So that is what is the third stage, what is called the pantry preparation. So you are piling up your essential foods because, and this was more so in cases where the situation was bad, like US or Italy. In US, the situation was so bad, people, when they came out, and there was no lockdown in many places, like, for example, New York. People came out, and when they went to the store, either the store was closed because it had run out of products, or when it opened, it was full, but only till the time the stocks lasted. And when people rushed in, they bought like in bulk. And so within a day or two, everything was sold out. So then when the stocks are out, the stores will be closed, and then it's back to shutting of the shops. And so people realize that as soon as they go out, when they see the store open, the stores will not remain open for a long time. So that's where the pantry preparation was the stage they were kind of preparing themselves for. And then the fourth stage was quarantine living. So we were forced to live inside. We can't go out, and then we got used to the online shopping if we were not used to, and so on. And we were getting used to longer delivery times, and the companies were getting used to the the disruptions in the supply chain. For example, Amazon and other e-commerce companies could not do business for 6 to 8 weeks because you are not allowed to go out. The delivery boys cannot go out. The stocks cannot move. The trucks cannot move. So the business is kind of stopped. So that was like quarantine living preparation. And then the fourth stage, that was fourth stage, and the fifth stage was restricted living, where again you can go out, but you can go out and have to come back, or you go out in a very restricted way. Like there were things like containment zone where you are restricted to within your locality. You can't go out, or you can go out, but you have to come back by 5 o'clock. Like that's what is happening in Kolkata. The shops are open between 10 and 5. So things are restricted. You can't just go out and roam. You go to the shop and come back. And so we have faced all these situations, right? And what finally it is going to emerge at the end of the tunnel, it is going to be, hopefully, the normalcy is going to come. But that normalcy is not going to be anything similar to what we have seen before COVID. It is going to be a normal situation which is different from the earlier normal situation. So that is what we are calling as a new normal. So everything will be normal depending on where you live in next 6 months, 1 year, whatever. Schools will reopen, shops will reopen, streets will be full of car, buses, train, but things will be different. So it will be the new normal. So this is how consumer behaviors have changed, and this map from Nielsen shows how different countries are living in a different world. And this is just a glimpse that because COVID spread in different times in each of these countries. China was first. Today, China is the only country, as you can see, China is the only country which is living in the new normal. So because it was the first one who got infected, and then they took these things in a very, on a war footing, and they eventually they claim that they have defeated virus and they are out of this situation, and they have opened up. That's what they claim. So they are the first country in the world to get infected and the first country in the world to come out of it. So that's called the new normal. So now, I don't know really whether they are living the same lives exactly how they used to live, but they are living the life, and it cannot be more unrestricted than what it is, right? That's called the new normal. So China is living a new normal, but if you see the other countries like most of North America and Europe, you see them in blue shade. Blue shade is more like quarantine living or restricted living. or quarantine living, preparing yourself to open up someday when the governments allow you. So different countries in the world are living in different restrictions, except for China, which is in a new normal, other than either in restricted living or and moving towards new normal, or restricted living, waiting for normalcy, or some countries living in quarantine preparation, some are living in pantry preparation. So all those 6 stages that we saw. So that's how things are today. And now if you see this table, you will see how the consumer behavior is very skewed. So everything that we used to buy before COVID, we are not buying the same way. This is a set of things which are more like medicines, so things like medical supply, rubbing alcohol, bath showers, first aid kits, multi-purpose cleaner, antiseptic, more like medicinal, healthcare, well-being kind of products. Now, if you compare the data, you will see that before COVID, that was a normal so-called pre-COVID market. Is there a question?
No. Please continue.
Okay. So in the pre-COVID world, and that's what we are comparing with. In the pre-COVID world, the first column shows you this is what the growth rates of this the sales growth were. Growing less than 10%, whatever the growth rate was. Using this, when we compare in what has happened in 2 different scenarios, and this is the US data. In the first scenario, when the first data of the COVID infections or infected cases came, you can see in the second column that the growth rates, the sales growth rates jumped to double digits. Simply add 10%. So everything became 20%, 10%, and it was much higher. So people started stockpiling these things. These are only medicines. And then when you see the third column, and there's a difference of 1 month between second column and third column. So by the end of February, when actually the local transmission started in the US, the growth with which these products were being sold, that means the pace with which people were stocking these medicines was much higher, because the growth rates were like 80%, 60%, 50%, 30%. So that means people were predominantly buying these products. Okay, if these were wellness and healthcare and medicinal products, look at what the food products look like. This is very American data, but just to give you a glimpse of consumer behavior, shifting consumer behavior. So things like powdered milk products. Now, powdered milk is what they use as a substitute for milk, or dried beans, and this is what they eat: canned meat, rice, tuna, beans, pasta, bottled water. Immediate, like your lunch and dinner and breakfast. This is not luxury, this is not esoteric or an exotic meal. This is your bread, butter, your lunch and the dinner. Again, if you see the same way that that what was happening pre-corona was the normal single-digit growth rates. In fact, when the first case came in the beginning of the February, the growth rates actually fell. People probably avoided these things because they thought, it might be infected. So this shows the avoidance behavior. But if you see the end of February, which means by the time we realize and we reconcile that no, it is not going to go away, boss, you have to live. And you have to live with these kind of fishes and this kind of rice and this kind of bean. I mean, you can't stop eating, right? So you have to buy from these store only. You can't, how much will you avoid? And then when you started thinking, yeah, I can't avoid, I have to buy, then better buy and stock it in my home. That's again pantry preparation, because, because we were learning that whenever I go out, the stocks are either empty or there is a overcrowding in the store. So either the store is closed, I can't go inside, or if it is open, people are going crazy. So, so there is only one way of buying, that is stockpile and live with it. Okay, now let's come back to India. That was US. So just to look at the big picture. Now, if this is a pandemic that nobody has seen, obviously nobody ever had a solution, right? So look at Indian context. A lot of industry, a lot of sectors have got infected. As Professor Jayanta was saying, one of the most badly affected sector is the restaurant industry sector. Hotels, yes. Airlines, yes. Tourism, yes. Well, let us start up with restaurant sector. What is called the QSRs or the F&B industry. Now, if you talk about restaurant, then you cannot avoid thinking about food delivery, right? So there are two big players, Swiggy and Zomato. And even the big players like Swiggy got badly affected. Now, restaurant industry, which was $50 billion big, got so disrupted that the restaurants who were affected itself, they continued their discooperation with Swiggy, right? To the extent that most of them kind of untied themselves from Swiggy. 60% drop in registrations in Swiggy. And the customers who were ordering from Swiggy like anything are now, the order volumes have gone down by 75%. So the Swiggy's food delivery business has actually, if I can use that word, collapsed. And they were quick to realize that, but more importantly, what is the learning for us is that they were quick to change. And they realized that business model, which was so far based on food delivery, is not going to sustain. You can't wait for COVID to be over. The company is going to shut down if you continue to wait for COVID to be over. So you have to change if you want to stay alive, right? So they changed to what is called, to becoming what is called a hyper local delivery app, which means delivery of groceries in the small localities of 200 cities where they are operating. And all the 2.5 lakh delivery people which were delivering food had to be retrained. So they retrained all of them remotely, because you can't go there and face them. Why? Because there's a lockdown happening. You can't go and meet face to face. It's not possible. So remote training of 2.5 lakh delivery people, training them to teach them how to deliver grocery, which they have never done before. And all they knew is how to deliver food, right? And just imagine, there's a learning there. How do you do that in the shortest possible time? That is only one thing. How do you change your business model? How do you retrain your sales delivery force? And then not only that, you are adding businesses. You had food, you add grocery, you add Genie model also. Genie is where you're acting like a postman. And I will deliver a good X from point A to point B. Right? It can be a letter, it can be a courier, it can be a product. So that is something again where Swiggy has never done, but they've added that. And all of that change results in disrupting your compensation structure. The sales force, which have been trained to do a particular thing, gets a particular kind of money for doing those things. Now, when you change what they do, the money that comes with it, the incentives that come with it will change. And now with this model, the incentives will drop. Now, if you don't redesign your incentive, they are going to go away because the income is going to go down. They're going to earn 15,000. Now they will earn 8,000. Who's going to stay? You have to redesign. Okay, that's what they had to do. And if you look at the pace with which, if you were watching Swiggy every day, these are 3 snapshots. If you saw Swiggy app, when you open Swiggy app on 13th of April, you could see that they had the traditional grocery, which they had added by the time, which is a new product, but they had added by the time. They had added meat to that, which they added quite late. Just a couple of days before April, they added meat delivery. And they had added the Genie delivery. You see that here, Genie, which can bring anything from point A to point B. The grocery, which was the latest on the Swiggy platform. Restaurant is the old business model, which is going down. The meat is the new one. 5 days down the line, you could see pet care also appearing there. And another week from there, you saw that restaurants are advertising on the platform. So things are very dynamic, right? So that's why it's called the metamorphosis. Why metamorphosis? Because it's no longer the food delivery app. It is a hyper local delivery app. Hyper local means it can deliver to every street in the 200 cities that is there. You can order a product X to be moved from this gully to that gully, from this locality to that locality. That much level of hyper locality it has. Interestingly, while we are talking about Swiggy moving from food delivery to hyper local delivery app, Amazon is going the other way. Amazon itself is a hyper local delivery thing. It sells products through its platform. It moved into food delivery, right? And that too not before COVID. This happened in the peak of the COVID. While the e-commerce business of Amazon was shut for 6 to 8 weeks because of lockdown, nothing can work, right? The roads are empty. Your trucks cannot travel. Your delivery boys cannot travel. How will the e-commerce work? So it's shut, and so you have to fire people, or people are leaving jobs, or salary cuts, or so everything going absolutely haywire. All the retailers selling on 2.5-3 lakh retailers selling on your platform, they are going bonkers. Digital payment companies, no transactions happening. How will they earn the commission? So they are going bonkers. So everything going haywire. And then all your product categories which were impulse purchase, they are also going for a toss, right? So it looked like a strategy where everybody is doing everything. Amazon moving from hyperlocal delivery to food, and Swiggy moving the other way around. So things were this is the transition through which companies were moving. So if you look at the summary, of what was happening. So as Professor Jayanta was also saying that, even when your established businesses were kind of struggling and badly struggling, and we saw we are not talking about, the small companies. Swiggy is hugely funded, right? It's a unicorn. Its valuation is more than $1 billion. So we are not talking about small companies. So if Swiggy was struggling, Amazon was also struggling in a way in the post-COVID world. Think of the small startups, those which started 1 year back, 2 years back, or less than that. they are badly struggling. Because why? Because demand is totally crashed. Most product category demand is bad. Customers are not buying anything other than medicine, healthcare, wellness, and essentials. If you're not in any of these and you're a startup, and then the funding is badly affected, who will fund when the market is down? It's postponed. And then how do you reduce your cost? You have employees, fixed cost. How will you cut down the fixed cost? You start firing, and then you face the negative publicity. Zomato fired people, Swiggy fired people. And you know how markets, how the media reacts to that. I mean, so the point is that they are also under tremendous pressure to cut costs. And then in the US ecosystem, they say that 50% of the startups will fail or will shut down in next 3 months if they don't cut their cost, because there is no revenue coming in, and the cost is, if the cost is fixed, if you don't cut it, then you will not be able to sustain. Your funding is fixed. Most startups have funding to survive for next 6 months, at max. If your revenues keep going down, you have enough fund to just live for 6 months, keep paying salary. So obviously, to sustain your survival, you have to cut down the fixed cost, like shutting office, or getting rid of stocks, or getting rid of warehouses, or getting rid of people, so that you can extend your survival. And that is what is happening, which is not good. You should not fire people, but then it's a question of who lives. The startups live, or you sustain jobs. So anyway, so this is the context. We can discuss that also in more detail. Look at other just for a summary. I mean, there are bad news everywhere. The tourism industry, aviation losing 25,000 crore. International travel is not going to start anytime soon. It is not going to recover at least in the next 2 months. That's what Emirates has said, and many others also have said. Food companies, yes, they're doing good business. Essentials, medicines, healthcare, wellness. To the extent the Make My Trip is also entering food delivery. Can you imagine Make My Trip, which is a tourism, which is a travel aggregator? Can you imagine a travel aggregator has entered food delivery business? I mean, this is really interesting, which really shows that when the travel is dead, as you know, travel is almost, kind of dead or very bad. Food is definitely the only thing people are consuming. So, and where is the strategy here? I mean, just think of from that point of view. Luxury brand is the last thing people want. Even if you have money, you don't want to buy 2 Mercedes just because you have money. It's a lockdown situation. You are not really in the best of your, of your mind to buy 2 luxury brands, 2 Rolex or 2 Mercedes or anything like that. So luxury brand is down. Discretionary goods are down. So healthcare, nutrition is going up. Interesting insights coming from various places. For example, if you look at the agarbatti industry, there are small scale industries in agarbatti. There is large companies also like ITC, which is into agarbatti. A lot of medium industries. Agarbatti industry is not facing so much of disruption, because a lot of these incense sticks and dhoop and perfumed oil are actually being used, because it's a very export dependent industry. I mean, exports have got affected, but now that they are resuming, because the economy is being revived. So as soon as the technicalities of exports are handled, the demand for these are is there, because they are being used for immunity boosting. And you'll be amazed to know that interesting insights like this, in Mumbai, the consumption of salt has increased by 4 times. Can you guess why? It's not that people are eating more salt, but the consumption of salt has gone up by 4 times, because people are using salt and water for washing their food products. So salt consumption has gone up by 4 times. That, the interesting things happening in these times. Anyway, I'll just wrap it up in the interest of time. The last thing I want to say is just to, as a coping, what have we learned in terms of, we were disrupted, we were disturbed, businesses have shut down or will shut down or will have to reinvent themselves. As I said, if you can't rebound, you reboot. If you can't reboot, you have to reinvent. But in the long run, everybody has to reinvent. So how do you cope in the short run and finally in the long run? So the lessons from these last 2-3 months is that the businesses have to be agile, flexible, and very swift, nimble, which startups have, but startups don't have funding. I mean, if they don't have funding, all that agility that they have built, you need funding also, right? The big companies have funding, but there is bureaucracy there. There are multiple offices and multiple power sharing, and the decision making is so complex. The agility goes away, right? So one has to have both, right? The cash flows to stay alive and the agility and the capability to keep changing very frequently. Secondly, all the jobs and the careers and the employment, these things might look very old-fashioned now. As you know, Swiggy delivery boys, Amazon delivery boys, they're all gig workers. So a lot of gig work will reappear. Gig work means that, I do this for commission. So I can stop doing it for Amazon. I can do it for Swiggy tomorrow. I can do it for Zomato the next month. So it's a gig work, like Amazon Turk or, all these delivery boys, gig work, right? So gig work might be back because gig work, it means Ola drivers, Uber drivers, they're all gig workers. That means there's a flexibility for workers as well as for the company, right? Third, you have to keep changing your business model to continue to grow, and for the fourth point, especially for business continuity. So it's a big challenge for business continuity, because if the business suddenly stops, you have to reboot and start from zero, right? Which is very difficult. So it is rather, better that we see a small blip, but continuity is there. Because the continuity is stopped and we go back to zero, then starting from zero is like, it's a hell lot of a job. It's very difficult. So continuity of business requires resilience. And for resilience, funding is one thing, but you need business models that have to be constantly rejigged. That means keep tweaking, keep changing, like Swiggy has done. Before dying, they change the business model, right? Like Amazon is doing. And a lot of other companies are also doing, but many others are not able to do. Like travel industry, like Make My Trip has done. They have rejigged and become like into food delivery. It doesn't make sense, but still, survival is more important. Strategy will come later. So resilience is required, agility is required, business continuity is required. Technology, now it is more important than anything else. Because with technology, you can scale up very fast. You don't have to go to 10 customers physically. You can build an app and reach thousands of customers in one go. That's the scaling up. So scaling is important because scaling means you can get more customers, more money, more revenue, adapting to different markets, and more importantly, stakeholder engagement. Whatever little relationships you have with the stakeholders, customer, suppliers, that will be like a cushion in difficult times. Suppliers will not leave you, customers will not leave you if you had done something for them, if you have some relationship, some bridge. And today more than ever before, you need the government, because government is the one who's telling you what to do, and they are the ones who are redefining what is MSME. They are the ones who are selling follow this, or they're the ones who are reviving the economy all over the world. Without that, it's very difficult, because you can lobby with them, they will support you, and things like this. So government support more than before is very important. So I'll close it here. I think I've taken not more than 30 minutes, and I open it up for questions now. Over to you, Professor Jayanto.
Yeah. Dr. Ramendra, before we take the questions, can you tell us when is IIM Calcutta going to open up the campus, and what are the additional safety measures you're going to do at IIM Calcutta?
Very honestly, even I am not very sure about that, but I can share whatever I have heard.
Yeah. Yes.
So first question from you is about when are we going to open up. So let me quickly tell that what we have done is that our summer vacation technically is still on till 5th of June, and two of our programs, one is the MBA executive program and the other is the MBA executive for engineers, the manufacturing engineers. These two programs have started on time, but because of this lockdown situation, they have started online. So we have not postponed these two executive programs, except that we have not opened the classrooms. We have started online because government will not allow physical classroom. Now coming to mainstream MBA program and other mainstream programs, none of them have started. In fact, MBA program so far was supposed to start when the institute reopens next week, but it has been postponed by a month. So as of now, it will open up hopefully by July's second week. But again, we cannot take this decision. It is MHRD ultimately. So we may not be able to open it till July. It depends on the government.
But in your view, when it opens up, like what additional precautions you plan to take both at the hostel and at the classrooms and the campus? And what do you suggest for us also? Because
yeah, to be honest, I really don't know what we are doing. I'm sure director and the others are deans are planning it, and we will get to hear it very soon. I can only think about something that can be done. I don't know what exactly we are doing. See, one is that for example, if you see the UGC notification, which I'm sure you would have seen, which have
Yeah.
come almost a month back. They have already announced that in August you can start your senior batches, and in September you can take the incoming batch, the first batch. I mean the fresh batch.
Yeah.
So, and they've talked about all things which are applicable, like social distancing and all that in hostel, in classroom, in mess, in other areas. Now in classroom, we can have a staggered model, like you don't have same lunch time, you don't have same breakfast time. So people go on people go to same place in different times, including having staggered classes. In schools, I have heard that they can go partly physical, partly online when the schools are allowed to open. Like half the class will come home, half the class will stay home, and half the class will attend class.
Right.
So that means that there is a social distancing because now half the class is there, so there's more distance, and the other are looking at it from on a Zoom or on a technology platform. But as of now, I don't know how we will open up. I mean, what will be the strategy? But something has to be done in terms of staggering classes and partly moving it online and partly opening up for physical. That's what my guess is. But I'm not sure.
No. I think you're right. I think, thank you so much. It was an excellent presentation. And I think Dr. Ramendra started off with the COVID thing. The only good news, one very good news, the recovery rate in India is very high. So that's a very good news. Even if those who are contracting are now recovering fast. Many of the police people also recovered, who got COVID have recovered. So that's a very good note. People are recovering. And you also gave some very good case studies, Domino's, that Atta Meter, Go Air, and how agile Swiggy has been. And you've been taking off Make My Trip. I think so that's very important, that we have to all reboot and reinvent. And for the young students, it's very important today that, there is nothing is permanent. So it's good that at the age of 21, 22, you have learned this. So you should also be ready in your own careers to reboot and reinvent, like a Swiggy, if you want to really survive, because COVID is not the last challenge you're going to face in your life. So, there are lots of more challenges going to come. And as today only, and you must have seen this Asian Paints ad. And Asian Paints is a great company. So, like you may postpone your painting a house for 2 months, 4 months, but you cannot postpone it for years and years. So Asian Paints have come up with this very safe painting ad I was seeing, where, they are showing their painters in the PPE, wearing like astronaut kind of dresses and using spray painting. So an urban clap, which is also, I found that, they're using very hygienic ways to come and take care of your sofa sets and health products. So I think many companies are really doing a very good job in trying to reboot and reinvent themselves and quickly come back. The whole idea, as Dr. Ravinder Singh said, was that, either you be contactless or zero contact or very minimal contact. If that is what I think is the way to go forward now. So some questions will be there, like Dr. Ravindra was talking about the travel. But, I again feel that, travel, we cannot indefinitely postpone travel. We are going to, as a habit, people like to travel. So one of the things I've always seen Dr. Ravindra share prices. It's a very good reflection of how the market perceives this. So VIP from 500 was down to about 180. But the share price has gone up to 260, 250. That means again, though VIP had zero sales practically, luggage. But I'm sure that they're going to find a way to reinvent themselves, right? So now I'll go to the questions, some very interesting questions I can see in the chat boxes. I'll first go to a question from Uma Kumari Singh. Uma Kumari Singh, she's asking on the automobile industry. So Uma, can you please, very good question I thought. So why don't you explain yourself, your question, Uma, to Dr.
Good evening,
Ravindra.
sir. Good evening, everyone. This is Uma Kumari Singh from Heritage Business School. I'm a second year student.
Louder,
So
Uma, a bit louder. Huh?
So my question to you is this, that automobile sector in India play a very important role for our Indian economy. But from last 2 years, automobile sector is seeing a very good breakdown, very bad breakdown, because the millennials are using Ola and Uber for traveling within the city. So sir, after COVID, post-COVID, do you think people belief will change and the certain measure of keeping distancing, social distancing will play a very big role here? People will try to avoid contact with each other. Like you said, we may go for zero contact or minimum contact. So there, will that thing change and this sector will revive again?
She's saying that millennials will not buy any cars. That was the thing, all using Uber, Ola. But now with COVID, she's saying that, people are wanting to, as you said,
correct.
don't want to come in touch with contact. So she's saying, what will be the net impact on the the
Correct,
Suzuki and the Honda, Hyundai sales.
Yeah, see, in fact, before COVID also we saw that the sales of automobile companies was going down because of Ola and Uber. In fact, FM herself mentioned that as a reason why automobile was not growing, right? So now that you add COVID to it, I think COVID should enable, should act like a positive accelerator to the automobile industry. Except the fact that people might wait for new normal to come. They will not want to buy now. They may want to postpone it till things open up. See, because public transport is more riskier in this time than private transport, right? So either you buy a car or you travel by your own vehicle or you take a Ola and Uber, right? So that way, I would say that probably the post-COVID situation might be against public transport, unless it is very important. Nobody would
Yes,
want to look forward to public transport if you have a choice of going by private transport.
yes, sir.
I mean, that's my guess. I'm not very sure how long it is going to last, but in the short run, probably there might be a pickup in the automobile sector, which is currently in a bad shape. I agree.
So thank you so much, sir, for clearing my doubt.
Okay,
Thank you,
thanks.
sir.
Uma, where is your placement been in Tata Motors? I think, na?
Yes, sir. Tata Motor Finance.
Tata Motors.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's why she's very concerned about it.
Yes,
Very good.
sir.
Yeah, so finance,
secondary,
as you know, plays a very important. Yeah, finance plays a very important
Yeah.
role in the buying of the car, of the two-wheeler,
yes, the
the
car
four-wheeler,
finance,
right?
car finance. Yeah.
So therefore, so if you want to boost the demand, then you should suggest to your company that they should make the financing easier,
Yeah.
so that
Car
Yes,
people
sir.
find it more attractive to buy, which otherwise they might postpone. If you want them not to postpone, then you should make the financing more easier or
Financing.
less time taking or more attractive.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone. So my question is, sir, the pandemic is forcing the closure of brick and mortar retailers around the world as consumers are switching to online shopping. Sir, what measures should they take to survive in the market, the retailers?
Yeah, good question. But I don't think, this has been a question that has been haunting everybody for since time immemorial. First they said that Walmart has come or Walmart will come and it will eat the small retailers. And then they said, when e-commerce came, they said that e-commerce have come and now e-commerce will eat the small retailers. I don't know if you look very young. I don't know if you have heard this because I've been hearing this for last many years now. At first,
Yeah.
Walmart was a threat. Now, then e-commerce was a threat. If you see the data, it is actually in India. It is it is in the favor of small retailers. That 85% of all sales is happening in small stores.
Yeah.
E-commerce is only 2%.
Yeah.
And your Walmarts and everybody put together, the modern trade is just 8 to 10%. Right. So neither e-commerce have eaten small store nor Walmart has eaten small store. What has happened is that all of these have found different strategies to cater to the same customer. I mean, wherever they are, all of them are present. They are present in different, different strategies in a different place. I mean, example is that, in the small store you go there to buy when you need products in a hurry, right? Like what is called the unplanned purchase. But when you are going to, the Big Bazaar or Walmart, you are going there for monthly purchase. So your basket is actually divided between planned and unplanned. So the planned is going to the Big Bazaar, the unplanned is going to the small store. And out of the planned and unplanned, most of the planned is taken away by e-commerce. But e-commerce is still there in big cities, right? So as I said, e-commerce is still 2%. 80% is still small store. And what e-commerce has also further done is that they're not really interested in eating the small store. Amazon is working with Kirana store. The latest that if you read, Amazon is working with Kirana stores. Flipkart is working with Kirana stores. Small stores have already become the last mile, the delivery agents. A lot of small stores are now the last point of delivery for these e-commerce companies. You can go to these stores and pick the product, or you can ask the product to be delivered at your home. There are two options, right? So I don't think small kirana or even medium kirana is going to go away anytime soon. All this is like little bit of hype, at least in India.
Yes, sir. Just because
I think
this corona has. Yes.
Sorry?
So just because this coronavirus thing, so people are avoiding getting out of the home. They will prefer online rather than going to the store and buying the stuff. That was my point. So will that affect them?
Yeah, okay. Your question is more about Corona. I understand. Yeah, so I've
Yes,
not
sir.
answered that. Yeah, so you are right that Corona had shifted us to e-commerce because we could not go. But what the question that we have to ask is, or you have to ask yourself is, will this continue? I mean, are we never going to come out? We have come out, or we are going to come out. Unlock 1.0, as you know, has started from June 1st in Bengal, in Kolkata, June 8th, further opening up.
Yes, sir.
And after June 30th, there'll be further opening up. There'll be Unlock 2.0, then Unlock 3.0. So as we said, we are moving towards new normal. And I don't think people will stop going to any store. People will go to the stores. And when I go to the, to the market, I see people buying from street shops. There are people buying from modern trade. There are people buying from Kirana store. They're buying from everywhere. I don't think people will stop buying from Kirana store because there's a chance of infection. They're just going as if nothing happened.
Yeah, Shubham, and one more thing.
Thank you,
Whereas we have all been, Shubham, we have all been very scared of Corona. But look at this great company you always discuss in the class, Reliance Industries, right? In this lockdown period, Facebook has invested about 43,000 crores. And some of the great PE funds like Silver Lakes and Vista, they invested.
KKR.
They have come out with a rights issue that was very successful, oversubscribed. The reason why Shubham and all others, I'm telling you why they're investing in Reliance is because it's again reinventing itself in a technology company. So basically, because of Facebook wants to leverage on WhatsApp, and Jio has one of the best networks. They are also ready for 5G now. So they're going to leverage that and use WhatsApp, like what Dr. Ramendra was saying, using the Kirana stores. So a lot of changes happening. It is a question of whether your company can get into that change or not be agile. The word is agility, whether you can be agile and quickly adapt those changes. And I think Reliance Jio has really shown us to raise 1 lakh crores where others have been, staying shut. Moving on, we have another very interesting question from Diproshi. She's asking about the hospitality and what will be the booming sector. So Diproshi, can you ask a question?
Hello. Good evening to all. I am Diproshi Mondal.
Louder, Diproshi, louder.
Heritage Business School. Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yes, now better. Yeah.
Yeah, carry on.
Okay, sir. I am Diproshi Mondal from first year Heritage Business School. So my question is, like in this COVID-19, the tourism and hospitality sector are getting the most affected. So which will be the most booming sector and why? Post-COVID.
See, again, Dipushti, we really don't know. At least I really don't know how things will change, because see, what we have seen life in last 2 months, 3 months, was a large part of the financial year, but life is much longer, right, for businesses also. So this year might end up being definitely will be a bad year, maybe the worst year compared to many previous and yet to come years. But this year will not define a business. This year is not going to define a company that survives, right? So if suppose you're saying that a lot of demand fell in you're saying hospitality sector because of COVID, it might be the case that after 2 years things will revive, and when new normal comes, when as Professor Jayanto said, hospitality sector and tourism sector reinvents itself, after 2 years we might forget, like we have forgotten 2008 recession. I mean, for those of us who are old enough, we put that behind us. It's 10-year-old. So people will put COVID behind us. I mean, this is not. I mean, for those who are not able to survive this, that is maybe the end of the story. Those who die because of COVID. I mean, the businesses. But for those who survive, this might be a bad year. Next year might be a bad year. But after that, if you kind of reboot or reinvent, then you adjust yourself to new normal, the new way customers will check into the hotel or come to a restaurant or eat in the restaurant or whatever. So they will adjust to that. So eventually, I think it will be a new way of doing business. If you're able to adapt it, that will be the new market. I don't know if was that your answer, question or different?
So actually,
yeah, she was asking.
I'm a first year student. So during the second year, we'll be having our placement also. So
Correct.
gradually for 1 or 2 years scenario will change. Companies and their recruitment process will also change. So how will this COVID-19 affect those sectors and how will it vary?
how will it affect? Yeah, so it's a difficult question in the sense that, see, it will be down for most likely for the rest of this year, because people may not really go to resorts or to hotels, and even restaurants might take time to open up. So eventually, it will. So what we are saying is that eventually people would adjust to a new way of working. Now, what will be the new way? It's not just for the consumers to change, because see, very honestly, consumers really don't know what to do. I mean, I'm being very blunt here. You show them a picture and say this is better than the last one, and they will adapt to that. So you need a market leadership, somebody like ITC, who is a market leader into hotels and other hospitality sector. You need a market leader to come out with a reinvented business model and show the customer this is the new way of doing things. And if it is following all norms, it is following all guidelines, and it appeals to their consumer taste, then people might move to that, and the market might move to that. Are you getting? Let me give an example. So, for example, before Make My Trip, we used to go to the railway reservation counter and book our tickets. We used to go to the travel agents to book our flight tickets. But then Make My Trip came, and they said, no, why are you doing all that? I'm giving you this convenience from home that you can book multiple airlines both ways, and you can compare prices, and you can do all kind of comparisons and looking around, and finally deciding what combination of tickets you want, right? And consumers have adjusted to that. Consumers never knew that travel aggregators are going to appear in the industry, right? But travel aggregators appeared. Consumers did not bring them in. But consumers changed their habits once they were given a choice between travel aggregators or booking on the railway website or going to the railway reservation club for booking. They made a choice. So therefore, the industry has to take a lead. They have to understand the consumers and give the customers the choices. And depending on what choices consumers pick up, the market will move towards that. I mean, that's my kind of a hunch. So,
yeah.
But we really don't know.
I think Dr. Raman, that's a very good point. This Make My Trip thing, this again brings us the concept of entrepreneurship. That one is what the consumer wants, and what is the entrepreneur thinks that, Diproshit, that there's a problem of people going and booking, air tickets, standing in long queues, like the way I have done initially in my younger years. So basically, Diproshit, sometimes you have to think ahead. So one is consumer behavior, and one is the entrepreneurs can actually initiate the change. So there's a problem. Like in movie tickets, booking was a big problem, and so Book My Show came and showed us a different ways to book our tickets. Like that's why we now do it to Book My Show. So I think sometimes the consumer behavior will also be influenced by the suppliers or the entrepreneurs.
Correct.
Acha, I'm seeing Professor KK Chaudhary has joined in. So I'm really happy to see Professor KK Chaudhary, because he joined as HP, but I've now seen. So Dr. Ramendra, Professor KK Chaudhary was the director of the Army Institute of Management, and he's now as the advisor of the Heritage Group for so many years now. So Professor KK Chaudhary, would you like to say something to the group, to the participants?
I started my career from IIM Calcutta.
I know. I met you, sir. I met you at Heritage, if you remember. I met you there.
Yeah, yes, I can remember you. So nice meeting you after a long time, but nice. You have spoken nicely. You have nice speech. And as you have indicated, nobody can tell what will happen tomorrow. Because this year and next year, by this we cannot determine the swing of the business. It is the business which can, again, take us to a different route. And your reboot and reinvent, certainly, the business plan has to really shake the, I think the consumer behavior will be shaken by this kind of an approach. It is not that the consumer will behave the way they want, but ultimately the industry has to guide in a way. So that the consumers have to see that this is another way of looking into this. It is not that luxury buying will not be there today, but who says that tomorrow luxury buying will not be there?
Right.
So previously, before these things happened, so there was a statistics came that the Mercedes was sold in the rural areas, in the districts, in the subdivisions, not in the Alipur. So nobody knows what way it will swing, it will fluctuate, and we have to apprehend that the things will be better. And this wave will certainly will be able to handle it, will be able to face it, and I'm sure the business will be different tomorrow. Thank you, dear. We're meeting after a long time.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
Nice.
Thank you, Professor Chaudhary. Thank you, Professor Chaudhary.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's a question from Ravi Ranjan Mishra. Ravi, can you ask your question?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Sir,
Yes,
am I
we can
audible?
hear you.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
sure.
very
Go
clear,
ahead.
very clear.
Good evening. Good evening to all present. My name is Ravi Ranjan Mishra. I am a first year student at Heritage Business School. So, sir, my question to you is: in the post COVID-19 situation, what should be the priority of all the future marketing campaigns in order to deliver a purpose-driven and meaningful brand?
Okay.
Uh,
Okay,
and sir, and
thanks,
I have
Ravi,
a
for
sub
your
question
question.
also.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Sir, what do you think, sir, the COVID-19 situation will affect on D2C marketers?
B2C.
Yes, D2C.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Ravi, for your question. So your first question was about purposeful marketing, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir,
So,
campaigns and purposeful marketing.
okay.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, as we were discussing, that it is very difficult to predict, first of all, what will be the future. But when you talk about purposeful or purpose-driven marketing, then, purpose, I mean, depends on the segment. So, for example, you seem to belong to millennial segment, right, Ravi? You look young.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So the
Yes, sir.
millennial segment is very purpose-driven. They like to be associated with purposes. And so, if you're talking about your segment, then future I'm sure you know that you respond to purposeful campaigns more than probably I do. I belong to a very different segment, right? So it will be very
Yes, sir.
segment specific, first of all, right? Very
Okay.
segment specific. Different segments have different preferences, and so. But your question is, post COVID, how are we going to behave? Yeah,
Yes, sir.
post COVID, as we were, Professor Chaudhary also said, and Professor Jayanto also said that we really don't know, because consumers are not going to shape the industry, right? I mean, very honestly, consumers are going to adopt practices after the businesses have shown them the way. So, how is the industry going to evolve post COVID is something that we are all waiting to see. In the sense that it would be different from what it is right now. But all future campaigns are not necessarily going to be more purposeful or less purposeful. It will be based on the product, based on the industry, and it will probably become more social, because as you know, the world is moving towards more social responsibility. You would have heard that term, social responsibility. So social
Yes, sir.
responsibility might get enhanced in the campaign, in the communication, because people now realize that COVID has taught us that we are more interdependent. I can't just go out and sneeze in front of everybody, because everybody gets affected. So a lot of interdependence is there. Countries are dependent on others, and we are dependent on other people. So that kind of role of companies, customers like you from millennial segment would like to see. They would like to see the companies playing that role of being more socially responsible and being more meaningful socially, and in a meaningful way. So how companies can contribute to society and how they can contribute to you in a meaningful way. So most of the frivolous things will go away, like the case that we saw of Kentaro. That
Yes.
why did the ad face a flag? Because customers did not like it. Because customers, why did they not like it? Because it was in bad taste, because you were trying to they were trying to disrespect us, a particular class of
Community.
people,
Yes, sir.
community or domestic health, right? Now, none of
Yes,
the
sir.
customers are actually Kentaro customers. None of the domestic healths are Kentaro customers. Who felt bad? The domestic healths may not have seen your ad. Who felt bad? The people who felt bad were probably your target customers. They are not feeling bad because you said something bad to them. They are feeling bad because you said something bad to some other community or some other people. So that means there is a social side to a brand that might get exaggerated or might get underlined, because people are coming closer. Even if you're talking about low touch and zero contact, but it is at the thought level, it is a very interconnected and interdependent society, right? As you know, we all know that the planet is in a bad shape, environment is in a bad shape. So all of us want to contribute, and we know that we are very small contributors as individuals, and we know that companies are very powerful, and companies are polluting a lot, and they should make up for it also. So we look at large companies and we look at governments to play a larger role, right? And this is where the consumers are moving to. If we don't see those companies and countries playing that heavy role, playing that big role, because we're looking up to them. If they don't play that role, we perceive them to be socially responsible. I think that's where most of the campaign might be bent towards. That's my understanding. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very much.
Okay, hope so. Yeah.
Dr. Ramendra, we are talking in marketing, basic things like this need and then want and desires. So in very similar line, I find a question from Rahul Singh in the chat box. So Rahul, can you elaborate your question?
Good evening, sir. This is Rahul Singh, first year student from Heritage Business School. Sir, my question to you is, how can various companies position some non-compulsory
Rahul,
products?
a bit louder. Rahul, you're not clear.
Yes,
so louder.
Yes, sir. How can, sir, various companies position some non-compulsory products through advertisements in the market as essential products, so that it can reach out to those consumers who don't consider it as essential items?
Yeah.
Interesting challenge. And why would you want a non-essential company to position as essential?
Sir, not a non-essential company, but a brand reputed company to position a non-essential item as an essential item.
Yeah. So why would you want the brand to?
No, I think he's referring to, for example, my guess that, for example, this body wash, right?
Exactly,
it is not an essential thing, but now, for example, if ITC wants to increase its Fiamma body wash sales and compete and make sure like soap, I think that's his idea. So how does ITC position a body wash as a soap in the body of a consumer? That's what I think. Rahul, is that what you're trying to say?
Exactly, sir.
Okay. Yeah. And my question to you, Rahul, is that why would you want the company to do that, or why would a company want to do that? Just to sell?
Sir, because I did my internship with ITC and I've worked on some live projects. Sir, based on my personal experiences, I feel that there is a lot of potential in that basic product, like sir told, body wash, to replace soaps. Because given the current time, everything related to hygiene or anything which promises the customers that they have some medical ingredients towards it or in it can have huge potential in the market. So if the companies, they can come around with something which can ensure the consumers that the body wash that they are using have some medical ingredients to it, as well as the beauty qualities that it has, I think it has great potential to replace the soaps and be a household thing.
Correct. Yeah. So that's exactly correct. So therefore, you have to find the occasion. You have to find a context. For example, if you see how hand wash, liquid hand wash, right?
Exactly.
How it has replaced soap for washing hands.
Exactly.
Earlier, there was no concept of sanitizer and no concept of hand wash. Soap was used for bathing. Soap was used for washing hands. And that was for everything, right? So now the concept, as Professor Jayanto was saying, the concept of body wash came for bath, and now you're saying, how can we sell body wash as a soap? So therefore, so if you go back and see how the concept of hand wash came and it replaced the soap. So people found a value in replacing the soap with the hand wash, because people thought that if you use soap, then soap becomes dirty. And so the next person is actually touching a dirty soap, right? So there's a hygiene factor there. But you have to also realize that the value that is delivered by a hand wash over and above soap is visible to people like you and maybe most of us here in this segment. It is not visible to all segments. Like rural people don't even use soap. Forget about hand wash. Exactly. Right. So if you're trying to sell a body wash or non-essential like an essential, it is something that you have to show that in which context, to which segment are you going to replace essential with a non-essential. Just the way the soap has replaced, a hand wash has replaced a soap, it has not replaced and probably will not be able to replace in all segments, because all of them will not find it of high value. It's very expensive, right? So you might want to start from upper middle class, where they might want to use body wash, and you have to communicate the value of body wash compared to soap. How it is through medicinal, as you're saying, medicinal uses, it can deliver better value, more cleanliness, or all those ingredients that you have added there, which you're not adding in soap. So all those communication has to be there, which will be based on consumer behavior. That means, what are they looking for? What are they not getting in soap, which they're looking for? And how can body wash with superior attributes can add value to or address those consumer needs? Exactly. That will be based on your market research on the consumer.
Exactly. So given the current scenario, I think there is a huge potential in that thing, because anything
Yeah, so you have to find out what kind of customers have those needs, what are they looking for, which they don't get in the soap, and then what are they ready to pay for, and then accordingly you have to price and make a product according to that. Yeah, so you have to do the consumer research on that.
Research.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all the
Thank
best
you,
to
sir.
for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you,
Ramendra,
sir.
that's very
Thank you.
nicely answered. One question, Dr. Ramendra, is from my side. You know, one doubt I was
Sure.
having. It's more on marketing strategy and branding, basically. So, for example, Dabur is a very big name, and they come out with products called Dabur Honey, for example, or But when it comes to the real fruit juice, the name Dabur is hardly appearing. You know, building a brand is a very big thing. Again, with Titan watches we know. But when it comes to Tanishq, I'm just trying to ask a question that as a branding person,
Right.
they have called this Titan Gold so that, a new brand did not have been created. So like Odonil again, the word Dabur is not coming. Many people may not even know that the real fruit juice is made by Dabur or Odonil is made by Dabur. So I was just asking you, why do companies drop their names and actually try to create individual brands, putting so much money?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question. I mean, in the sense that this is about branding, right? How do you brand it? Whether you
Yeah.
going to, it's like Dabur is a corporate brand. Are you going to use that
Yeah.
for product branding, right?
No, but they have
So,
Dabur Honey, like they have Dabur Honey.
They have a
and,
Dabur Honey, correct. So it's a matter of I think one is a matter of strategy, the other is a matter of the consumer behavior, and the third can be that whether your brand is homegrown or is it acquired. In the sense that, for example, if Pepsi has purchased Tropicana brand, if you know that, right? So they have not added Pepsi Tropicana because Tropicana was a brand which was acquired. And so if you are acquiring a brand, you are also acquiring a lot of customers who are already, loyal to that brand. Now, if you go and brand it like Pepsi Tropicana, you are disturbing the entire equity that is there with the customer. So that is one thing that what kind of brand. If you're acquiring a brand, then it's difficult to tweak it. But if you're growing another brand, then the question comes that are you using or will you use corporate brand or will you use a different brand like Dabur Honey, or you're going to use you're not going to use a corporate brand. So now whether corporate brand can be extended to that category is the question. That means can you use a Dabur name to Honey? Can you use a Dabur name to any other product category? Or should you come out with a different name? That again will be dependent on whether the corporate brand name can be extended or not, right? I mean, that will be part of how the brand is stretchable and whether consumers will accept the Dabur in that product category. Like if Dabur makes, say, bread, will consumers accept Dabur bread, or will you come out with a different name of the bread? Will that be more acceptable? Because every brand has a core value, right? I mean, I may like Dabur Honey, I may like Dabur Chyawanprash because both are, say, immunity boosting, something like that. Something like that. But if you bring Dabur bread, I don't see bread as a immunity boosting. I don't see it as a wellness product.
Right.
So I may kind of confuse as to whether Dabur bread is really a bread or is it something else.
Right.
So there the question comes that whether the bread should be branded separately than the corporate brand. So it's about customer behavior, and it's also about whether that brand that corporate brand can be stretched to a new product category.
True. Understood. Okay, Dr. Singh, we are almost at, we have 1 hour, 20 minutes now. So I think time has come. On behalf of the Heritage Group of Institutions, on behalf of Heritage Business School and my personal behalf, I would like to thank Dr. Ramendra Singh for taking out your valuable time of coming and speaking. We also like to take this opportunity to thank our the top management led by our CEO, Mr. Pradeep Agarwal, and our director, Mr. Prabir Roy, who's always inspired us to do this kind of work. So by which we're able to connect all the time with the corporate and academia. And I'm very happy that Professor K.K. Chaudhary could be there today. He spared his valuable time to be here. I also want to thank the faculty members who are there today. And I also want to thank the students. The students are restless, but I'm glad that they're almost there for 1.5 hours. So it was a very, very enlightening talk. I think there are a lot of takeaways because the presentation was very structured. So I think in the presentation, we could very clearly see the case studies on various companies who did, the Domino's, the Go Air, but the Swiggy was the most important thing. I think, the way they have switched and the Make My Trip, I think that is what is important, that how do you reboot, reinvent yourself, and to be agile. That's a big takeaway for all the students, that they should be very agile and they should be able to reboot and reinvent themselves. So there's a lot of takeaways. I'm sure that will help. And I think a very specific answers you gave to the questions on the question of automobiles and branding. So I think there was a lot of things. To my question also, you gave a very good answer that, how much a corporate brand can stitch itself, and how much there's a big decision for the chief marketing officer of the company to decide that, how much for the corporate brand and how much for individual brands. So I think Dr. Ramendra Singh will, again, as we said, I'll formally invite you to come to a campus and face-to-face with the students. We have a very nice, it's a 50-acre campus, which is very large by a private school standard. And we have a very nice seminar hall, which is there for III sessions. So Dr. Ramendra Singh, we thank you once again.